What I'm going to show you today is just working with A34s, converting to and from various formats, specifically CSV to A34, and then that A34 back to a CSV. Now, I have some other formats in here as well, just to show, quickly how do you convert different formats to an A34, and what you're going to see is the process is pretty much the same. You're just swapping out a transformation module and then accommodating the different inbound data points to the same kind of A34 data mapping, essentially. So I'm going to hop right into the CSV to A34, and that's the main one we're going to focus on. And what you are presented with here is our 7-stage assembly line view. You can think of everything as kind of jumping from left to right, and through each one of these stages, they're going to be doing something for the most part. Save for the source system and target systems, these are really just documentation. In this case, I've just named the source system CSV inbound, and I've chosen a CSV icon. It's not necessary to do this functionally, but I like to do it because it helps me visually identify exactly what's going on. So essentially, we're taking in a CSV and spitting out an A34. The protocols that we're doing this is in this listener. So the way that we get the data into the transaction framework in PilotFish is through the listeners. In this case, we're just doing a directory file listener. I have a polling directory of a sample EDI input A34 directory, and I'm just listening for a file named A34 with an extension CSV. So the CSV is just going to have some data in there. We're going to get some rows out of that and map the columns to XML using our source transformation module. Now, really all you have to do here to set this up, it's pretty straightforward, is you just add a format. In this case, I named it CSV to XML, and in the dropdown here, I selected CSV. Now, most CSVs are delimited by commas, but if you had something that was pipe delimited or some other character delimited thing, you can just quickly swap this out from a comma. But by default, you've got your comma. You can also name your columns here. So in this case, I've already gone through and named all of these out. This helps the mapping kind of figure out what your column names are so that you get a finite known column name. So that'll help us in our mapping. If you don't do this, it's okay, but it's going to kind of automatically figure out how it wants to parse that, and your mapping might be slightly different if you don't do this. The first line, I want to skip that because that's our header row. That's our column names. And I have suppress empty tags on there because I don't want to have empty data if it's not in there. So I don't want to have empty tags whenever we actually go to do our mapping. And we'll get to that in the target transform side. You'll see what that looks like. In the routing stage, we don't really need to do much here in this case because we have one target on the left-hand side and one target on the right-hand side. So our routing rule is just all targets. If we had more than that, we could set up some rules, but in this case, it's pretty straightforward. In the target transformation side, we're going to be doing our mapping here in the data mapper and then converting it into an EDI file. So to do that, let me open up the data mapper, and you'll see that we've got our drag and drop, 3-pane drag and drop tool. So left-hand side to the center, right-hand side to the center. It's basically what we're going to do. And just to show that, I already have this mapping built out, so we'll just step through this pretty briefly. But let me delete this root node here so you can see exactly, kind of the starting point, what you're going to be doing, right? So when I say I'm dragging from the left to the center, literally drag from the left to the center, from the right to the center, and we're just going to map out this EDI document. So I can pick interchange and all its attributes, and then just drag that onto XCS data, and then I'll grab group, transaction, and I'm holding Shift to select more than one or Control to select more than one. And I can just drag those on, so on and so forth. If we're going to be mapping to our loop 2000, we'll jump down into that and grab, whatever it is that we need to grab and map to. And essentially, you're going to be doing this, for whatever elements that you need. For example, if you need to fill out your INS segment, I'll just grab 1, 2, and 3, drag and drop them in here. And so I've got INS 01, 02, 03, and then I can literally just drag from my source data to my target data the relevant values. And you'll do that until you build out the required data for an EDI document. But let me actually reload the mapping from this so you can see kind of what a full mapping is. I won't go through this whole thing here because there are quite a bit of fields. Some of them we have filled in automatically, so we know like we've got, I just reloaded the mapping if you didn't catch that, but for the like transaction set identifier code, we're working with an 834, the implementation convention reference, that's a 5010 x22, and so on and so forth. And as I scroll down here, you can see that we've really just filled out this mapping all together. One thing I didn't touch on too, and before I forget that, to actually load in these different formats, you actually open up your source format here on the left-hand side. In this case, we did a CSV, so it'd just be like your transform. You'd select your CSV file. In this case, if I look in my input directory, I've got this 834.csv. So I'll just select that as my sample, and then we could read the format, and it'll pull in, all those records just like before. And you do the same thing on the right-hand side for EDI. You would open your target format. You would go in, select EDI, and I would browse to my table data because that's where the schemas are at. So I'd select the 834 XSD and then just read that format in. And don't want to save, but that's essentially how we got these trees on the left and right hand side. So I'm going to reload the mapping again just to make sure that we have everything as it was. So now we can go to testing mode. So once you've actually set up your XSLT or your mapping, you can actually run through this and see what it looks like in real time. So I have some sample data here, and I'll show you how to get this once we get to testing mode. But essentially, you can copy and paste this sample data from testing mode. You hit this button, and you can paste the data in here. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and show you what it looks like when I run the test. So the idea is that you keep, going back and forth, doing your dragging and dropping until you get all of the different segments that you need to have filled out. So closing this out. Finally, on the transport side, after we do the mapping, we have the EDI transformer set here, so it'll run through that and convert that EDI XML into a flat EDI file. And then finally, we're just writing that out to disk using the directory file transport. Again, it could be any protocol that we have as a transport, but in this case, I'm just putting it in an output directory. So I'm doing something special here, but I've selected a output directory, just for a target directory, through an environment property here. So you could just actually directly select an output directory, right? So 834 out. You could do that, but I have mine parameterized a little bit. And for this one, I'm just using OGNL to generate a file name. I won't go into this too deeply, but essentially there's some default attributes that get generated when directory listeners pick things up. In this case, I'm just, picking up the file name that the file name was picked, or the file had when the file was picked up, and just appending 834 to it, and then making it a .edi. You could just manually type something in here if you wanted to as well. So you could say, my CSV to edi.edi, however you need to do it. But I'll just leave it like that so we can see that. But I'll go ahead and save, and let's run it through testing mode. All right, so we can see when we picked our file up, we got our CSV in the text format, and that runs through the CSV to XML transform, and that takes basically those comma separated data points, puts them into named elements, and for each row we had, there's an XCS record parent element. So that's something that we're going to be looping through to, during our mapping to EDI. We get routed over here, and let's look at this XSLT. So this is that mapping that we did to take the CSV, and we just filled in the blanks essentially from the data points that came in. And then finally, we converted it back into an EDI flat file. and it gets written out to disk. So it'll show you what data gets written out to disk here. So if I actually come to my file system, and let's go open in System Explorer, and I can jump up a little bit. So I know it's a relative path whenever you open that. I'm dropping my outputs in here. Here's A34, and it's this file right here. So if I open up my Sublime, you can see this data here. So that was literally what was written out to disk from our transport. And that's pretty much it. So in this case, we've taken a CSV, converted to an A34. Pretty straightforward. The process is pretty much the same for TXT, a TXT file, or an Excel document. The only difference is we're just swapping out this Excel, or the CSV transform for an Excel transform. Pretty much exactly the same. If I run through this process, you'll see that in testing mode. We'll see what that looks like. So I have the Excel document here, and I've just got 4 rows. There's or 5 rows, 4 data rows. So we're going to be treating it similar to the CSV, where the first rows are column identifier, and then the rest of the rows are the actual data that we want to pull out of it. I scroll over, you can see there's quite a bit of information. So running it through this mapping process is pretty straightforward. So let's see what this looks like in PilotFish. So Excel, it's a binary file, so it's going to look kind of funky when you open it up in here. It's pretty normal. It's not a text file, so that's why it looks like that. So you're not crazy if you see that. But once it runs through the Excel transformer, now you're going to see something that's very similar to our CSV. We've got a lot of columns in this example. Their names slightly different, but it's pretty much the same concept. As you can see, we've got an Excel workbook, and for each data point or data row, we have an Excel row element, which then for each column, we have those data points. And I'll scroll down. There's quite a bit in this one compared to the CSV, but kind of get the idea. And then we do a mapping from that Excel, which is going to be pretty much the same thing. You're just swapping out the different element names for, whatever they were in the CSV to whatever they were in the Excel, and just dragging and dropping them into your target EDI elements. And then finally it gets run through the transform to convert it to a flat EDI file. And we're just writing that out to disk again. So I think it's named the same, so it may have just overwritten the file. Let's see. Let's go back to my output folder. And yeah, I think it was actually this guy. Yeah. So there's the new file. I think. Let me double check. What did we name it? So go back to edit mode. Transport. Okay, so it was just A34 underscore A34. So we did overwrite it. So that is this file. Okay. The process is pretty much the same for going from TXT. It's pretty much the same, like I said, across the board, no matter what format you're working with. So in this case, we're doing flat file again, and just to show you in testing mode as well, kind of what that looks like. Again, same process. We get a flat file in, and this is just like a tab delimited, new line delimited file. We convert that with our delimited and fixed width file, and this is a lot more closely similar to the CSV rather than the Excel. So we even have like the same named column headers, and the mapping is going to be the exact same. And our file output as well. So kind of the one thing I really wanted to get the point across is when you're working in PilotFish, a lot of the time the only thing that's going to be changing is your source transformation. You might have to adjust in your target transform because columns will change, but you can pretty much reuse transformations in the target side or your mappings in the target side, just altering, where's the source data coming from. So that's something to keep in mind when you're going through doing these mappings. You might be able to reuse a lot of things, just tweaking them slightly. You can, save a lot of time just by copying and pasting. And another thing I mentioned before when we first did the mapping, this is a good place to get sample data for your actual transform. So what I usually do is I, Control A, Control C, or Command A, Command C if you're on a Mac. Go back to editing mode, and I can open up my data mapper, and in our testing mode here, in our testing tab for the actual mapping, I can click this little edit button up there, and then just Control A, Control V, and that'll be our sample data. Let's see if I can actually run that through. Yeah, see, there we go. Perfect. I'm not going to save that. And that's pretty much it for going to an EDI file. Now, I think the other way around is a lot easier. This was the more difficult part. So let's show how to go from an 834 to a CSV. Now, our setup is pretty much the same. We've got a directory listener. We're picking up an 834 file. I'm just configuring it to point to my 834 input directory, picking up a file titled 834 with an extension EDI. Now, in this case, I need to take EDI and convert it to XML. So what I've done here is I've enabled my X12 table data so we can actually get more contextualized EDI information so that you can transform without using the table data, but you're not going to get the looping hierarchy and context without it. So the way we do that is you just select your version down here. I have a parameterized location for my EDI table data, but you can actually just select the file directly. And what you're looking for is, from your X12 table data, you're just looking for this actual 834 directory. So wherever these files are contained, you can actually just select that. And that's pretty much all you need to do to contextualize the data. For each document type that you're working with, you will have to add a row because all of the table data is organized by folders. So you need to tell it where each of those table data that you're going to be working with are at. In this case, we do have some enhancements we're adding. I would say most performance, leave off friendly naming and turn off code definitions. It does help with mapping though. So, depending on what you're doing, you may or may not want to leave them off. If you do leave them on, just keep in mind it does require a bit more space because you're adding text. But most of the time it's fast enough, it doesn't really matter. But that is something to keep in mind. But we're going to leave it just for now. We're going to leave it as attributes because it's easier to understand when you're actually walking through a mapping. And that is something you can refactor later if you want to save some memory during processing. But again, kind of the meat of what's going on in this route here is happening in the target transform. So we're actually going to do our mapping here as well. So we're basically doing the inverse of what we did on the CSV originally. So you can see our sample data now is an 834 XML document. We would just load in our source and target formats like before. Just select this guy. We're just doing EDI first this time. I won't select it all the way down because we already showed you how to do that. But on the right-hand side, it would be your CSV file. So you can see on the right-hand side, we've got each of our little columns, and they're already fully mapped out for us. So again, what you would do is you would drag, and I'll start from here. Let's just delete the whole thing. We'll start from the left-hand side and build out the right-hand side. So I'll pull in my XCS data, pull in this XCS data, so drag it from the left to the center, from the right to the center, and now we just want to build out all of this. Don't need the summary element, that's really just for kind of statistics. I don't know if I really care about the row element either. So now I can literally just drag and drop my mappings, right? So in this case, I probably actually want to do a for each loop, right, through the XCS record. So let's add a for each because I have multiple. So do for each. And let me move my XCS record down under. And if I had a mouse right now, I could scroll. It's a little easier when you do that. But I'm going to just drag that there. So now for each looping element, so in this case, I'm going to be looping over our loop 2000. For each loop 2000, I'm going to fill out our loop 2000 element. And I can literally just drag again, INSO1, INSO2, INSO3, and so on. I'm not going to sit there and make you watch that whole thing, but you kind of get the picture, right? We would go through each segment in our looping construct here and just literally drag and drop it over. And let me reload our mapping so we get all the data back. And you can see once we gone through and did all of our drag and dropping, that's kind of what it looks like. Now, if I go to the testing tab, again, I can test this in real time. We'll just run that through, and you can see we've got our EDI CSV information there. And that's pretty much the entire mapping. Again, you can get the sample data by running this through testing mode, and I'll show you how I do that again. But essentially, we're just writing this out to disk again through the directory transport. But let's run this through testing mode. We'll see what that looks like. So we picked up our flat 834 file, run it through the EDI transformation module, get that converted to XML, route it to from our one source to our one target. Now we actually will do our mapping. So that's running through the XSLT that we generated, and that's from those literal like one-to-one maps here. For each loop 2000, we looped through and mapped out this kind of structure here. Then finally, we ran it through the CSV transformation module, and you can see that it gets converted back out to a comma-separated file. We just write that out to disk. So let me look at our disk here in our 834 directory. And we can see the CSV document here. Let me open this up. Oh, don't convert. So let me make sure I have the right one. Double check our output. What were we picking up? 834 EDI, so this would be the 834 CSV. Ah, yes, I picked the wrong one up, so let me open the right one. I thought it looked kind of funny at first. Oh, let me close that out because I think they're named the same. I think that's why I might have been confused. Convert. Ah, yes, that looks more correct. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Going back here. I think that covers everything for the most part. I know we do have tutorials online that kind of go into this in more detail. But yeah, thanks for watching the demo.